Some lies unravel slowly, like a loose thread you barely notice, until the whole damn garment falls apart in your hands. Mine exploded like a landmine, triggered by a single, innocuous-looking envelope delivered on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon. My name is Mark Thompson. I'm 52 years old, a construction engineer based here in Denver, Colorado. For 27 years, I built things: bridges, office towers, infrastructure meant to last. Pouring concrete, reading blueprints, managing crews. It's a demanding job. Long hours, often dirty work, but it's precise. You follow the plan, you check the specs, you build on a solid foundation. I thought I'd built my life the same way, especially my 15-year marriage to Sarah Miller. Turns out the foundation was rotten clear through. That Tuesday, I got home around 5, same as usual. Pulled into the driveway of the house in Highlands Ranch, the one Sarah had loved, the one that took me 2 years of side jobs and weekend work just to scrape together the down payment for. It was bigger than I thought we needed, fancier too, but she'd wanted it, and I'd wanted her to be happy. So I worked. Extra shifts supervising the crew on the Peterson Tower downtown, sacrificing fishing trips I used to take with my buddies, putting off fixing up the old Ford pickup sitting in the garage. We were building a future, I told myself. Our future. The mail was on the entryway table where Sarah usually left it. Bills, junk mail, a magazine, and one official-looking window envelope addressed to Sarah Miller. It wasn't her usual mail. This one had a return address that snagged my attention. Denver Department of Human Services, Child Support Enforcement Division. My first thought was confusion. Maybe a mistake? Some bureaucratic mix-up? But there was a nagging unease. Sarah handled our finances mostly. Maybe something from her past, and still, child support? It made no sense. We didn't have kids. Maybe the envelope was slightly torn. Maybe my thumb slipped, opening my own mail next to it. I don't know. But I saw a line of text through the window that froze the blood in my veins. It mentioned a case number and a name, Emily Chen. Below it, referenced parent, David Chen, and further down, the other parent, Sarah Miller. My breath hitched. Chen. David Chen? The name rang a faint bell. A former colleague of Sarah's from her marketing job years ago. I barely remembered him, but Sarah Miller, Emily Chen, child support enforcement? My mind was racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. I carefully slit the envelope open. My hands were shaking slightly. The document inside was cold, official, impersonal. A notice of income withholding, or something similar. It detailed child support obligations for a minor child, Emily Chen, born March 12th, 3 years ago. Mother, Sarah Miller. Father, David Chen, March 12th, 3 years ago. I stood there in the hallway, the setting sun casting long shadows through the window Sarah insisted we install, the one that cost a fortune. 3 years ago. We were married. We were living here, in this house. 3 years ago, Sarah and I were sleeping in the same bed, eating dinner together, going through the motions of a normal marriage, and apparently she was carrying, delivering, and somehow concealing the existence of another man's child. The world tilted. The floor felt unsteady beneath my feet. 15 years. The agreement. The sacrifices. All of it felt like a sham. A meticulously crafted lie built around a void where I thought trust existed. Anger surged, hot and blinding, followed by a wave of nausea. How? How could she do this? How could I have been so blind? I didn't move until I heard her car pull into the garage nearly an hour later. I was still standing there, the letter clutched in my fist, the paper crinkled from the pressure. The air in the house felt thick, suffocating. Sarah came in humming, dropping her briefcase, kicking off her heels like any other day. Rough one, she started, then stopped when she saw my face. The color drained from hers. She saw the envelope in my hand. Mark? What? What is that? Her voice was thin, brittle. I didn't shout. My voice was low, dangerously calm. It's addressed to you, from Child Support Enforcement. It seems you owe money for a child named Emily Chen, born 3 years ago. Father, David Chen. Denial came first, panicked and unconvincing. What? That's insane. It must be a mistake. Identity theft. Something. Is it Sarah? I held up the paper. Your name. Your known associate, David Chen. A birth date exactly 3 years ago. Explain it. She tried. Oh, she tried. Tears welled up. It was a misunderstanding, a complicated situation from before we were serious, a blatant lie given the date. Maybe someone was framing her. The excuses tumbled out, frantic and illogical. Stop it, I said, the words like ice chips. Just stop lying. We had an agreement, Sarah. 15 years we talked about this, no kids. You were clear. Career-focused, didn't want the ties, wanted freedom. Remember? Yes, but what? But you decided to have one anyway, just not with me, while living under my roof, eating food I paid for, sleeping in my bed. The calmness was cracking. Then came the shift. The tears turned manipulative. Mark, you wouldn't understand. It was complicated. David and I, it just happened. Happened? The word ripped out of me. A pregnancy doesn't just happen for 9 months, Sarah. A birth doesn't just happen. Keeping it secret for 3 years doesn't just happen. That takes planning. That takes deliberate, calculated deceit. Every single day. I remembered all the talks. The ones where she gently steered the conversation away from children. Mark, honey, you work so incredibly hard, she'd say, putting a hand on my arm. We have a good life, just us. A baby would just add so much stress, especially for you. Think of the cost, the time. And honestly, she'd sometimes add, lowering her voice, our families are so different. It might just complicate things, you know. At the time, I'd interpreted it as concern, maybe a touch of insecurity about her own background versus mine, which was more working class. I thought she was protecting me, protecting us. Now, the memory curdled my stomach. It wasn't concern. It was contempt disguised as care. She hadn't wanted a child with me. She thought I wasn't good enough, or perhaps not rich enough, not sophisticated enough for the kind of legacy she envisioned. But apparently, David Chen was. And the money? God, the money. All those extra hours I pulled on the Peterson Tower project, that bonus, nearly $50,000 before taxes, that I'd sunk straight into paying down the mortgage faster and funding the new kitchen Sarah wanted. I'd been so proud of that, thinking I was building security for us. Where had that money really gone? Who is Emily Chen? I demanded, my voice flat again. Finally, cornered, trapped by the irrefutable fact on the paper, she broke. Not completely, not honestly, but the dam cracked. She's my daughter, she whispered, avoiding my eyes. David is her father. And she was born 3 years ago? While you were married to me. A choked sob. Yes. Get out, I said. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. Mark, please. Get, outside, pack a bag, leave, now. Where will I go? I don't care, I said, and the terrifying part was I meant it. The woman standing before me was a stranger. The life I thought I had was a phantom. Figure it out, like you figured out how to lie to me for years. She cried, pleaded, but there was a core of steel in me I hadn't known existed. The betrayal wasn't just the infidelity, the secret child. It was the calculated destruction of our agreed-upon life plan. It was the exploitation of my trust, my work, my sacrifices. It was the 15 years vaporized by one ugly truth. She eventually packed an overnight bag, still weeping, still trying to make excuses. I didn't watch her leave. I just stood there in the expensive hallway of the house built on lies, listening to the front door close, leaving an echoing silence that was somehow louder than her hysterics. The grenade had detonated. Now came the fallout. The days immediately after Sarah left were a blur of numb shock and burning anger. The silence in the house was deafening. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of the life I thought we had, now tainted. The photos on the mantelpiece felt like props from a play I hadn't realized I was acting in. But beneath the shock, the engineer in me started to surface, the part of my brain that deals with facts, figures, and uncovering problems. I needed answers. Not just the basic, ugly truth Sarah had tearfully confessed, but the whole truth. How long had the affair with David Chen been going on? How did she hide a pregnancy? A birth? Where did the money come from? Where did my money go? My mind started replaying the last 4 years with a sickening new filter. Suddenly, things clicked into place with horrifying clarity. There was that period about 3.5 years ago. Sarah had been under the weather for weeks. Not a dramatic illness, just constant fatigue. Nausea she blamed on stress at work. A persistent stomach bug. I remembered bringing her soup, trying to be supportive, feeling vaguely guilty when I got impatient because she seemed listless for so long. She'd waved off my suggestion to see a doctor. "It's just burnout, Mark. I just need rest." She spent a lot of time wearing baggy sweaters and loose pants back then. Claimed she'd put on a few pounds from comfort eating due to stress. Stress, right. Then there was the urgent family matter about 3 years ago. Her estranged Aunt Carol in Boulder, supposedly gravely ill. Sarah needed to go help out, be there for her. She was gone for nearly 3 weeks. I remembered calling, her voice often sounding distant, tired. She'd made excuses not to have me visit. Aunt Carol wasn't up for visitors. The house was too chaotic. I bought it. Why wouldn't I? I was busy, working a major deadline on the bridge project over I-70. I felt guilty for not being more available, for being relieved, just a little, to have the house to myself during a high-pressure work period. Boulder, not exactly next door, but close enough to manage a secret delivery? The timeline started solidifying. The illness coinciding with early pregnancy. The convenient family emergency perfectly timed for delivery and initial recovery. It was audacious. It was sickeningly well planned. Next came the money. As the shock wore off, a cold fury settled in my gut, specifically about the finances. I wasn't naive. Raising a child costs money. Hiding one, especially with medical expenses, must cost even more. Sarah handled most of the day-to-day bills from our joint account, but I always reviewed the statements, or so I thought. I pulled up our joint checking and credit card statements online, going back 4 years. At first glance, nothing screamed secret baby, but looking closer, knowing what to look for, patterns emerged. A series of cash withdrawals, $500 here, $800 there, clustered around the time of her illness and her trip to Boulder. Always under $1,000, maybe to avoid scrutiny. They were interspersed with normal spending, easily overlooked if you weren't searching. Then, the credit cards. There were charges I didn't recognize, but Sarah always had explanations. Work expenses she'd be reimbursed for, gifts for clients, online courses. But one recurring charge caught my eye. Small amounts, billed monthly for about a year leading up to the birth, from something vaguely named Foothills Wellness Services located in Boulder. Prenatal vitamins, checkups disguised as alternative therapy, and then larger charges around the time of Emily's birth. One significant hit several $1,000s to a medical center, also in Boulder, Boulder Community Foothills Hospital. Not Aunt Carol's house, a hospital. My blood ran cold. The planning, the sheer nerve of it. Using our joint funds, money I earned busting my ass on construction sites, to pay for doctor visits and the delivery of another man's child. But the real gut punch came later. I remembered Sarah mentioning, maybe 2 years ago, needing to consolidate some old credit card debt. She'd handled the paperwork, presented me with a loan application from our credit union using our home equity. It seemed reasonable at the time. She said she'd gotten carried away with some online shopping and work travel expenses. I trusted her. I signed where she told me to sign. Now, a horrible suspicion gnawed at me. I logged into the credit union portal, something I rarely did, and there it was, the home equity line of credit, HELOC. But the amount drawn was far higher than the old debt she'd mentioned, significantly higher. I started digging through old emails, searching for keywords, and I found it. An email from Sarah to herself, accidentally saved in a shared cloud folder we barely used, forwarded from her personal account. It detailed wire transfers, large sums, sent from a personal savings account I didn't even know she had, replenished periodically by transfers from our HELOC. Following the trail, I accessed the HELOC statements directly. Withdrawals, regular, substantial withdrawals over the past 3 years, coinciding with, well, everything. The dates lined up with her longer business trips, unexplained shopping sprees, and likely ongoing support for Emily and maybe even David Chen. I did the math, my hands shaking with rage. Adding up the cash withdrawals, the suspicious credit card charges, the HELOC drawdowns that clearly weren't for consolidating debt, it came to just over $42,000. $42,000. Roughly the pre-tax amount of that Peterson Tower bonus I'd been so proud of. Money I earned through grueling 80-hour weeks. Money I thought was securing our future had instead funded her secret life. It wasn't just infidelity, it felt like outright theft. The violation was profound, cutting deeper than the emotional betrayal alone. My labor, my sacrifices, had unknowingly bankrolled the ultimate deception. I needed to confront the other player in this sordid drama, David Chen. Finding him wasn't hard. A quick LinkedIn search confirmed he no longer worked at Sarah's old company. He was now listed as a consultant, which often means unemployed. I found a phone number through an online directory. I called him that evening. He answered cautiously. David Chen? Yes, who's this? Mark Thompson, Sarah Miller's husband. Silence on the other end. Then a shaky, "Oh, hi, Mark." "Cut the crap, Chen," I said, my voice tight. "I know about Emily. I know you're the father. I know she was born while Sarah and I were married." More silence, then a sigh. "Yeah, look, Mark, I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't cut it," I interrupted. "I want to understand something. How the hell did you go along with this? Letting your kid's mother live with another man? Letting me foot the bills while you played part-time dad?" His voice was weak, full of self-pity. "It was complicated. Sarah, she said she needed time. She said leaving you would be financially devastating for her, that she needed to wait for the right moment. She swore she loved me, that we'd be a family eventually. Emily deserved a stable start, she said." "Stable? You call this stable? Living a lie?" "She managed things," Chen mumbled. "She said she had savings, handled the expenses." "Savings?" I scoffed. "Let me tell you about her savings, Chen. It came from my paycheck, from equity in my house. Did you know that? Did you ever wonder where the money for Emily's fancy stroller came from? Or the rent on Sarah's secret friend's apartment she used near Boulder? Did you know Sarah helped you cover your rent for 6 months after you got laid off? Guess whose money that likely was?" A choke sound came over the line. I didn't know the details." "Convenient," I spat. "You didn't want to know. You were happy to let her manage things as long as you got access to your kid without the full responsibility, maybe even got a financial cushion yourself." He didn't deny it. His silence was confirmation. He wasn't just an adulterer. He was a willing, weak accomplice in Sarah's long con. Before hanging up, I asked one more thing. "Is the kid okay, Emily?" A slight hesitation. She has some health issues. Pretty bad asthma, allergies too. Needs regular doctor visits, medication, special air filters. It's expensive." Asthma, allergies, expensive. Another piece clicked into place. Not an excuse for Sarah's monstrous behavior, but perhaps a factor in her financial desperation. Her willingness to siphon funds from me, her lies escalating to cover the mounting costs she couldn't handle alone, especially with a partner like Chen. It made the betrayal feel even colder, more calculating. She hadn't just chosen another man. She'd chosen to exploit me financially to sustain that choice and its consequences. The conversation left me shaking with a renewed, colder anger. The scope of the deception, the financial drain, the complicity of Chen, it was staggering. But knowing the facts, however ugly, gave me a grim sort of clarity. I wasn't just a heartbroken husband. I was a victim of calculated fraud. And I wasn't going to just roll over. It was time to fight back. It was time to call a lawyer. The next morning, I called Eleanor Vance. Her firm, Vance & Associates, had a reputation in Denver for being sharp, thorough, and utterly ruthless in divorce cases, especially complex ones involving financial disputes. I needed someone who wouldn't be swayed by tears or excuses, someone who dealt in facts and figures. Someone who understood that this wasn't just about a broken heart. It was about significant financial malfeasance. Her office was downtown, sleek and professional. Eleanor Vance herself was exactly as advertised. Mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with eyes that missed nothing. She listened intently as I laid out the story, sticking to the facts, the timeline, the discovery of the letter, the financial discrepancies, the conversation with Chen. I handed her copies of the child support notice, the bank statements I'd highlighted, the HELOC records, the printout of Sarah's incriminating email. I kept my voice steady, channeling the precision I used when discussing a complex engineering problem. Emotion was a liability. Evidence was ammunition. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen on a legal pad. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice crisp, "this is egregious. Truly. The infidelity is grounds enough, but the concealment of the child born during the marriage, coupled with what appears to be significant dissipation of marital assets, that's where we focus." Dissipation of marital assets? I repeated. Using joint funds or assets for purposes unrelated to the marriage, especially for an affair or supporting a child from that affair, without the other spouse's knowledge or consent, she clarified. That $42,000 you've identified, potentially more, that wasn't spent on your marriage. That was spent furthering her deception and supporting her relationship with Mr. Chen and their child. Under Colorado law, we can argue forcefully that those funds should be credited back to you from her share of the marital estate during the division of assets. So she doesn't just walk away with half? That's the goal, Vance stated plainly. Standard is equitable distribution, which often means 50-50ths. But equitable doesn't always mean equal, especially when there's documented financial misconduct. We argue that an equal split would be inequitable given her actions. We'll need more proof, of course. Formal discovery, subpoenas for her separate bank records, potentially depositions of her and Mr. Chen. But what you've gathered already is a very strong start. Hearing a legal professional validate my findings, putting a name to Sarah's financial betrayal, dissipation of marital assets, felt like a weightlifting. It wasn't just me being vengeful, it was a legitimate legal claim. Justice, not just emotional closure, seemed possible. "What's the next step?" I asked. "We file for dissolution of marriage immediately," Vance said. "Petition cites irreconcilable differences, but we also explicitly state the grounds of adultery and concealment and flag the issue of asset dissipation for the court's attention right from the start. We'll serve her, and then the discovery process begins. It will get unpleasant, Mr. Thompson. She'll likely hire her own attorney. There will be motions, financial disclosures, potentially mediation, but we stay focused on the evidence." I hired her on the spot. The feeling was one of grim determination. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about reclaiming what was mine, about holding Sarah accountable not just for the personal betrayal, but for the calculated financial exploitation built on the back of my hard work. The following weeks were a crash course in divorce proceedings, Vance's team filed the petition. Sarah was served at the temporary address she was using, a friend's apartment, I later found out, likely one subsidized by my HELOC funds. As predicted, she lawyered up quickly. Her attorney's initial response was standard boilerplate: denial of wrongdoing, seeking an equitable 50-50th split, maybe even hinting at spousal support, alimony, which Vance assured me was highly unlikely to succeed given the circumstances. Then came discovery. This was the meticulous grinding phase. Vance's office sent out formal requests for financial documents, years of bank statements for all accounts Sarah held, including the secret one, credit card records, pay stubs, investment information, and crucially, medical bills related to the pregnancy and birth in Boulder. Sarah's side initially stonewalled, providing incomplete records, claiming documents were lost. Vance was relentless. She filed motions to compel, threatening sanctions. Bit by bit, the puzzle pieces came together, confirming my initial findings and revealing more. We obtained subpoenaed records directly from the Boulder Hospital detailing the costs of prenatal care and delivery, clearly paid from Sarah's secret account, which was funded by the HELOC and suspicious cash deposits. We got statements from the Foothills Wellness Services showing regular appointments. The depositions were grueling. I had to sit in a room, face-to-face with Sarah and her lawyer, while Vance questioned her under oath. Sarah stuck to her narrative of being confused, overwhelmed, making mistakes. But under Vance's sharp, persistent questioning, her story crumbled. She admitted to the affair's timeline. She admitted opening the secret account. She admitted directing HELOC funds into it. She couldn't reasonably explain the massive cash withdrawals or the Boulder medical expenses under oath without implicating herself. Her attempts to portray herself as a victim fell flat against the weight of the documented financial trail. David Chen's deposition was even more pathetic. He tried to minimize his involvement, painting himself as manipulated by Sarah. But he buckled under questioning about his financial situation, admitting Sarah had helped him out during his unemployment, admitting he knew she was still married and living with me, admitting he hadn't contributed significantly to Emily's expenses beyond token amounts. His testimony only strengthened our case regarding the dissipation of assets. Throughout this process, I focused on the facts, the numbers, the timeline. Like managing a difficult construction project, I compartmentalized the emotional turmoil and concentrated on the task at hand, building an irrefutable case. Every piece of paper, every statement, every admission under oath was another steel beam reinforcing our position. The anger was still there, a cold, hard knot in my stomach, but it fueled my resolve rather than clouding my judgment. We calculated the total dissipated amount meticulously, including the initial $42,000 I'd found, plus additional expenses we uncovered through discovery related to setting up a separate life, rent deposits, furniture for the secret visits, etc. The figure approached $60,000. $60,000 of marital money, predominantly earned by my labor, diverted to fund her secret life. Vance laid out our position clearly to Sarah's attorney. We wanted the full $60,000 credited back to me before any remaining assets were divided. We wanted the house sold, and after the mortgage and HELOC, which we argued she was primarily responsible for inflating, were paid off, I would receive my $60,000 off the top from the proceeds. Then whatever remained of the equity would be split, and we were prepared to argue for more than 50% of that remainder, given the severity of the deception. We also made it clear, no spousal support for Sarah. Her lawyer initially balked, tried to negotiate the dissipated amount down, argued it was all just marital spending. But Vance held firm, pointing to the mountain of evidence, the deposition transcripts, the clear timeline of deceit. She made it clear we were fully prepared to take it to trial and let a judge hear the whole sordid story. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a humiliating public trial, Sarah finally blinked. The resolution didn't come in a dramatic courtroom showdown, but through intense negotiations mediated by a retired judge. Sarah's lawyer knew they were fighting a losing battle. The evidence Vance's team had compiled was airtight. The depositions had painted a clear picture of long-term deception and financial misconduct. Going to trial would likely result in an even worse outcome for Sarah, not to mention the public airing of every detail. We reached a settlement agreement. It wasn't a moment of triumphant joy for me, but one of profound, weary relief. Justice, cold and hard on paper, had prevailed. The key points of the agreement were exactly what Vance had fought for. 1. Dissolution. Granted, the marriage was officially over. 2. Asset dissipation acknowledged. The agreement explicitly stated that Sarah had dissipated marital assets totaling $60,000 for purposes unrelated to the marriage. This was crucial, a formal acknowledgement of the financial betrayal. 3. Financial restitution. I would receive the full $60,000 back. This wasn't considered part of the asset division. It was a repayment before the division. 4. Division of assets. The Highlands Ranch house was to be sold immediately. After paying off the original mortgage and the entire HELOC balance, which effectively came mostly out of Sarah's potential share due to the dissipation ruling, the remaining equity would be divided. And crucially, the split wasn't 50/50ths. We agreed on 65/35ths in my favor, reflecting the severity and duration of her breach of trust. 5. No spousal support. Sarah waived any claim to alimony. 6. Debts and belongings. Each party was responsible for their own debts incurred since separation, and personal belongings were divided separately. Signing those papers felt like closing a chapter. Not a clean break, because scars remained, but a necessary amputation. Sarah, stripped of the financial cushion she'd built through deceit, would face the consequences of her choices. David Chen was now legally and solely responsible for child support for Emily, without the invisible subsidy from my income. The burden was finally placed where it belonged. The house sold quickly in the Denver market. After all the debts, the $60,000 repayment to me, and the 65/35 split of the remaining equity, I walked away with a substantial check. It wasn't a windfall, it was restitution. It was the return of funds earned through my sweat and sacrifice. Funds that had been stolen not by a stranger, but by the person I'd trusted most. There was one final brief encounter. We met at the house for the last handover of personal items. Sarah looked worn, diminished. The confidence she always projected was gone, replaced by a brittle defensiveness. She tried one last time, a quiet plea. "Mark, I know I messed up, badly, but maybe someday." I cut her off, not harshly, but with finality. "Sarah, there's no someday. You didn't just make a mistake. You made thousands of choices every day for years to lie, to deceive, to steal. You built a life based on exploiting my trust and my work. The consequences you're facing now, you earned them. I wish you no ill will, but there is nothing left between us. Goodbye." I didn't look back as I walked away from the house we'd shared. The house built on a rotten foundation. Life after the divorce wasn't suddenly easy. The betrayal left deep scars. Trusting someone again felt like a distant prospect. But there was also a sense of liberation. I sold the big, empty house in Highlands Ranch, shedding the constant reminders. I bought a smaller place, a townhome closer to the city center, easier to manage, all mine. With some of the settlement money, my money, rightfully returned, I finally started working on that old Ford pickup in the garage, sanding down the rusted panels, searching for vintage parts. It felt good to build something again, something tangible, something honest, just for myself. I reconnected with old friends, went on those fishing trips I'd given up. The engineer in me knows that foundations, once compromised, have to be torn down and rebuilt stronger. That's what I'm doing now. It's slow work, methodical, like any complex construction project. There are good days and bad days, but the anger has mostly faded, replaced by a quiet resolve. I faced the ugliest truth imaginable, navigated the legal trenches, demanded accountability, and got it. I didn't crumble. I took back control. The future isn't the one I spent 15 years planning for. It's different. Quieter, maybe. More cautious, definitely. But it's mine. Built on solid ground this time. One honest day, one honest effort at a time. And that feels like a victory worth savoring.